Hi, I'm Matt Carr, and you're watching the 2022-23 School Budget Roundtable. This is an opportunity for the Superintendent of Schools and Assistant Superintendent of Business to discuss the budget development process with members of the community. So we're going to start off with introductions. We'll start with Chris Platani, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Business. Just wait for the camera. And next up, we have Dr. Blanche, the Superintendent of Schools, and our guest, Bill Harden, with the Heritage Hills community. And we have Glenn Heinz representing the Somers Education Foundation, and Town Councilman Anthony Sirico. Now, Dr. Blanche, if you wouldn't mind kicking it off with an overview of the budget development process.
Thank you, Matt. So certainly this year, coming out of what I'd say in my personal experience, the most challenging and difficult and yet rewarding 2 years of education that I've been in. So getting back to, and even like tonight, to be speaking in person, talking about the future needs of our school district is certainly a good feeling. And then also understanding there are challenges that are upon us now and moving forward that really weren't there a few short years ago. So hopefully tonight we'll get a chance to speak about a little bit of those challenges we see, how the budget can support those moving forward. And again, I would say that we have been very fortunate, my 12 years here, that we consistently have an extremely supportive community, certainly fiscally, and then also with their time and care that they put into our schools, volunteering, supporting our children before, during, and after school, and summertime and all alike. So again, we are very fortunate to see that coming out of this, that all of those good things helped us get through a very difficult time in Somers.
And any of our panelists, if you have questions, go ahead and feel free to ask.
Well, you know, this is a budget meeting, but let's start with something about transition. I mean, we're coming out of COVID. Children are making this transition, or students. How's it going? What are the challenges?
Yeah, and I would say the transition there is for our children, absolutely, families, and for faculty and staff. So all of us are transitioning through kind of what we would identify as an extremely difficult time. And yet through this, I think we've come to some understanding of things what we can do better and improve in our practices. Also how we can go ahead and do a better job of engaging with our community proper, supporting our children and their needs. And so as we're coming out of this, we certainly are seeing that some students did relatively well through this. But significant majority certainly struggled. Could be academically, could be socially, could be emotionally, could be family-wise in school. And so one of the things that we really have and will continue to be working on next year is making sure we follow that vision of the school district, really connecting with the social and the emotional well-being of our children. As if their hearts are not in a good place and their spirits are not in a good place, it's pretty difficult to get to their heads. And that conversation we have to make sure we're having with our children throughout the experience. So we've seen an enormous amount of growth from a social perspective just from September till now. You can imagine, I was actually just at Primrose the other day reading to some kids in kindergarten, and we had just actually gotten our cafeteria stations back in what they were before. So think about it, these are second grade kids that were there. So in their second grade year, it's been desk and rows. First grade year is pretty much desk and rows, and kindergarten is pretty much the same thing. So now they're coming back, and you should have thought, and what you would have seen when they saw these round tables and the chairs, the kids are thinking they went to a restaurant and everything like that. So what is it? And it was just that, but that's that whole socialization, all that fabric, and talking to friends and pieces and figuring out how do I, talk, hey, what do you have for lunch today? Things you couldn't do that 6 feet apart with a mask on. And so it's going to take time. And that's the part I think we have to afford ourselves, is the reality of it is going to take time and repetition. And as small as those things seem to be as important, they are extremely important. And so we're very fortunate to be able to get those experiences back here in the spring. And I would again compliment our community and the faculty and staff for, we've been back all last year. We were back in person. It was just a different way, but now we're back kind of where we were before this whole thing hit, 30 months ago or so.
That's terrific. Are there any other specific, support programs or initiatives that the district will put in place going forward in this new normal, as we call it these days?
Yeah, and I think that's that part, so the reality of it, we're always moving forward, and so did not expect this to be the thing that we had to move up, over, and through, but it is. And so when I think about some of the pieces that we're learning from this is that I use the expression, we have seen absolutely we need to kind of double down on our relationships with our children and with our professional staff, with each other, and from the children to adults and children to children. So that's going to take relationships, and it's going to take an opportunity for us to think about how do we spend time like this evening and talking and coming around the table and having a conversation. And so you'll be seeing things like we are going to be increasing some of our social worker support at the high school next year. We know we have some students who are going to need an extra level of engagement at that level. Also, we started this year, and we will continue next year, there's a program called Youth Mental Health First Aid. You know, if you think about a first aid, I've got there, these are the 4 things I need to check through. I want to make sure that, looking at if there's any blood, am I applying pressure, am I checking the heart rate, and okay, I got it, then where's the medical help I support? So we're looking at all employees being able to understand what are some of those signs that we should be looking for in this new kind of reality as kids are working this through. So not creating mental health professionals of 500 employees,
Right.
but giving that information so that the handful of employees, the information is flowing to them. So that is one of the trainings we're seeing. So more eyes, more support, more caring in our schools to support our children to get through this. Yes, children are resilient, and yet there's also lots of horrific things that have happened to children as well as our adults, and we can't afford to miss the adult piece here too. Again, these are professionals that were in their homes trying to support family and then also trying to support the schools and supporting kids. So one of the things I would say also is that the opportunity for us is we've been slowly working this, but to decrease our classroom ratio a little bit with classrooms and things like that. So if you look at like middle school here now, typically a teacher used to have about 120-ish or so, 25 children on their caseload. And what we've been able to slowly do over the last number of years, when we continue, is that number is getting closer to 100, 95 to 100. Well, what that allows is a class of 20 versus a class of 25, and then the ability for us to connect better. And you can have a better chance to have conversations or small group meetings or team meetings and things like that. So that is a fiscal investment there to allow us to have that opportunity to have those relationships continue. So I would say doubling down on relationships is a key driver in our efforts in the budget historically and particularly moving forward.
So what resonates is that the experience is different for each probably cohort or age group.
Yes.
So at the younger level, the socialization, but maybe at the higher end, middle school and high school, you may be dealing with different, behavioral issues.
Absolutely. It seems a little, I don't necessarily counterintuitive, but, what research tells us and what we really drive a lot of our work on is engagement in our schools. And so when we look at that, we look at, and it's right in our mission statement that the school district will engage all learners at a personal level to be ensuring that they'll find success in a global society. So when we think engage, we're thinking, okay, are you cognitively engaged in what's going on here? Are you emotionally engaged in what's going on here? And then are you behaviorally engaged? So cognitively, am I having a conversation? Am I contributing to this work? Am I excited about what I'm learning about? So that kind of engagement. Emotionally, one of the clearest things at the high school emotionally is, am I vested? And not am I coming, I'm coming there to be a part of the kind of vibe and the energy of the school. And then behaviorally, am I there and am I showing up on time and are my grades doing well? And so those are the indicators we look for. So things like we just brought on a new sport at the high school this spring, girls flag football.
Yes.
And
Cool.
we brought in almost 30 young ladies who are now playing flag football for us here in the spring. So why do you spend money on that? Because they're engaged. They're engaged. They want to be here. Our team actually held the first ever flag football jamboree for Section 1 a few weeks ago. So we had 8 other school districts that joined with us here at Somers. And so now you've got 30 kids who are emotionally engaged at the school because we're saying, budgetarily wise, we're going to provide the uniforms, we're going to go into the coaching, we get the refs and all that stuff. That is far and above a huge piece for us to get that engagement and going in that regard. So that's, again, not counterintuitive, but it takes a moment to describe, well, why would you do that? It's because we want to make sure kids are engaged and they want to just be here with their hearts, and they do. You've been on the hill there at the high school,
Oh, yeah.
and the wind's blowing sideways and the rain's coming into you kind of get your ear and everything. That was what it was. But
They loved every minute of it.
They loved every minute. Yeah, we even had a couple of the Giants players come up and
Yep.
get some pictures with our kids and stuff. So, but that's an example of those are the things we cannot afford to let go of right now because always been important, but I would say more important than ever. And so our ability to maintain our rich musical program, our athletic program, our club program. One of the things also we're even seeing next year is that in this budget, we'll be bringing on the world language at the elementary school next year at SIS. So starting introducing students to that. I mean, the little one. I mean, they love to learn, and they love to learn a new language. And then all of a sudden, that starts breaking down barriers. When some students may already know some words and have some conversations, but it's just an opportunity for us to again cognitively engage in them, whilst they're also emotionally engaged in that work. So we're very much excited about pushing that down now to our intermediate school next year.
Okay. Have you chosen a language?
So good question, Bill. And right now, where I would say that it presenting itself, it's more likely going to be Spanish. And one of the things that when our world language teachers came together, certainly looked at multiple different languages, and our languages currently now are Spanish, Italian, and French in that order of number of students that participate. One of the things that we also see is that the number one language in North America as a second language is Spanish. It cuts across all different kind of careers and professional lives. And then also there's predictions of, anywhere between 2040 to 2050 that Spanish will be, a majority of the second language that's spoken in the States right now. And so from a business perspective, also from a social perspective, and then even locally here in Somers, the number of our families, just the time that I've been here, has gone from single digits, families that speak Spanish now, to double digits. So just creating that local atmosphere of understanding, appreciation, and partnership with a language piece there. So that's anticipating that's where it will be. Actually, the team's right now in the midst of looking for a teacher to guide that work, and that is the number one piece. And it's a Romance language, so if there was a different direction we could go, we could do that, at least as we're in that Romance language area, but it's going to be that instructor. It's a very, very challenging position to find. There's not a lot of world language teachers, in particular elementary foreign language teachers.
So, since we're still on program, pre-K,
Yep.
maybe you can make a few remarks about that program.
Right, so...
That's going to look like for us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tony, for mentioning it, because, I would... there's a lot of things to be proud about our school district, and I would say just here's another example. I'm not aware of. Many school districts have not historically received funding from the state for the universal pre-K program. And so last year, right about at this point in time, we get our budget runs from the state, so here's what you're doing. There was near zero conversation about getting funding for UPK, especially for a school district like ours. So we got it. Everybody got these funds. Here's I can tell we're like the only one who added UPK program to their system. So we added that, and we started that this January. So we had UPK program going for about approximately 20 students in our Primrose campus. And so what we're looking to do is now move that up to a second class next year. So we have 2 full classrooms next year of our universal pre-K program running inside of Primrose. And so again, I'm not aware of any other group that's going to bring it out again. So it seems counterintuitive to do this during the midst of COVID. But that's historically been a perspective that I have taken. That's when I think schools, businesses, organizations, families, when they do stuff like that in the hardest of times, and you come out of that and people look and say, how did you do that during one of the hardest of times? And frankly, what we found, it was actually a gelling piece, because it said, this is good for kids, it's good for families, it's good work we need to do. And now coming out of that, it was like, yes, that's exactly what even more sometimes our families need out of it. So we're very excited about adding a second section of it next year. And So, and hearing nothing but very positive pieces from
So
the community.
you're outsourcing the staff, right? Is that
We
right?
do, you do. Thank you. We have a long-term partnership with the YMCA.
Right.
And so they've done our before and after school. And then we're provided funding from the state. The only thing we can do with that funding is to support free tuition for children in the UPK program. So then, because we do have some space at the elementary school, there's no additional cost for overhead, lights and gas and all that kind of stuff. So we've got that. So we did partner with YMCA, wonderful job. And so we're going to not have to add any added cost to that. And so we can take the funds we're given, hand that over to that program as a community partnership, and they basically run that inside the schools.
So if someone's interested in participating, how does one?
Yeah, so we've already got some people who are thinking about next year because they got 3-year-olds or whatever now, but they're thinking about the following year
ahead.
listing out. So there's Stacy Elconin is our Director of Special Services here. She facilitates that program, and so we've got it there. And so we were very pleased that we've got enough now to run 2 sections. So.
Will you have the first group going into Primrose?
So next year, the first group coming into Kindy, yes. And I'm not sure if you're asking that for the reason I'm thinking about it, but what I'm very interested to see is, does that give an opportunity for the students to just seamlessly come into the schools
Right.
a little bit more?
How much farther ahead are they?
Yes. One of the things we're seeing too is that just the familiarity with the school, just where's the cafeteria, where's where's the PE room, so that opportunity is just, they're going to come in next fall, they're going to be the big kindergartners. Oh, I can show you where we're going, and they can navigate through the
Nice
building.
head
So
start.
again, just
Yeah.
taking that energy down a little bit. So
Keeping on that theme of all these great programming additions, are there others that you'd like to tell us about with updates, such as with IB or any other programs throughout the district, or changes for next year?
thanks, Glenn. I think the continuation again of the International Baccalaureate program here. So folks may be aware this is our 5th year at the high school level now, where we have the diploma program, which is for 11th and 12th grade students there. So that's kind of a choice. It's analogous to the AP program. So before we started that work, we had approximately about 20 to 22% of our students, juniors and seniors, would at least take one AP class. So, roughly 1 out of 4. So now we've added another AP class and additional IB classes. We're about 40% now of our children, juniors and seniors, taking at least an AP or an IB class. So we're seeing that growth of students. And so some do AP, some do IB, or some do what's called the IB diploma. So they're fully IB diploma piece there. So there's a, what is that expression? The tide rises, all boats rise. And that's really what we're seeing there. So the next piece of that kind of evolution there is in this campus. It is still the International Baccalaureate program. It's different though. It's for all children. It's more of kind of a way of being and how you approach your instructional practices. So this fall, this school will be going for accreditation. So that's an international accreditation that comes here for the school. So that's our next piece. We anticipate between November and January to do a site visit. And those are some folks from the States, some folks from international areas that will come in and visit the school district and following along, where everything is aligned with New York State standards, absolutely, obviously. The other piece is there's expectations where our students heavily involved in the instructional conversation. Are they driving some of their learning, or is it, kind of the old sit and get? And so it's like, no, how they're driving their learning there, as well as their ability to demonstrate their learning. So, for example, this year we're working on it. Next year, our first volume. Every 8th grade child has to present at the end of the year, kind of like their portfolio of learning before they head out of the middle school. So what did you learn, and what kind of community impact do you think you can create? And community can be your classroom, school, state, world. But what can you, at this point, contribute to the global community and what you've learned? So that will be a demonstration of learning. And next year will be our first year, and give a start, and then each year will grow into that more. So we hope to open up this school to allow the community members to come in and see their investment in the educational portfolio and talk to the children, see what the children are doing, see what they're getting for their investment from their taxes into the children. And so it's not a number on a spreadsheet. It's not something you're going to be able to look up on the website and things. You need to come in, talk to the kids, see what the kids are doing, and have that experience. So very much looking forward to that coming forth. And then swinging actually back at the high school, they're working on their 9th and 10th grade piece. So basically, flash forward 36 months, will be 6 through 12 International Baccalaureate program.
Excellent.
Have the colleges and universities taken note of this?
Yes, and so what we certainly see is, in particular, those students who would go for that full diploma program. If you look at your top tier schools and things like that, the acceptance rate for students who have that in their profile is about threefold from what if you don't have that in your profile. Maybe a straight 8 students, you may have those things, but if you've got that and your diploma program candidate, you have that because they know what that means. It's not, just mine and Chris's classroom might have the same title, but very different. His is much more exciting than my classroom. But the reality is that this everybody goes through, so the universities can kind of say, now we know what this means, because there's an external assessment that comes involved. There's also internal assessments that come involved. There's site visits that come to the school and accredit the school if we can offer that program. And so, yes, the universities see that as a very clear indicator of the student's academic, and as well as really, you have to be balanced in your life to be able to find that, so they see that as a balance piece too.
Sure.
So maybe we talk to both of you about the financial challenges that we're facing. We're exiting COVID as well, and that's going to impact financials. And you're facing inflation, and there are property tax certiorari issues and that we're facing. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about how that's going to impact us going forward.
I think Chris and I'll kind of partner on this one. Certainly, kind of where you close out there are those tax certiorari matters. And so I think it's been 6 to 7 years on those, Chris, right now. And so maybe you can speak a little bit more about the size and the scope and, where we go with that one. So.
Yeah, so currently there's probably somewhere around $22.5 million in claims pending for tax certioraries. And the 2 biggest tax certioraries that are sitting out there represent about 80% of those claims. And they go back 6-7 years now that we are still waiting to have these claims settled. What we've done in the meantime, have built up our tax certiorari reserve in anticipation of these settlements coming in the upcoming years. So currently, let me backtrack just a couple years ago. When COVID hit, we had some additional savings from not operating sports and just various program savings that we had when things kind of shut down due to COVID. So what we were able to do was increase the amount of money that we were able to put into the tax certiorari reserve. So at this point now, we're up to about $6.7 million in our reserve, which is, I believe, the highest that it's ever been here. So when these claims do come due, we have hopefully a large chunk of the claims to be able to pay for the tax certiorari reserve. And then anything beyond that is then when we have to look at exploring other options, which at that point, if it came in higher than that 6.7, at the board table, we can then look to bond out money to cover the rest. And
Is there money in the current budget set aside for that?
So no, we don't have any money set aside to go, say, into the tax certiorari reserve at the end of next year. But in any given year, I'd say the expenses come in somewhere between, 98, 99% accurate, which then kind of leaves that 1 to 2% that we have in additional surplus revenue, which then at the end of the year we then look to fund various reserves, and that's how we've we funded our tax certiorari reserve. We funded an ERS reserve that we have for the employees' retirement system, and that's kind of how we do it at the end of the year with any kind of remaining funds. And that's what we would continue to do at the end of this year. If there's anything remaining, we'll look to see where we're going to, what reserves we're going to utilize and put those funds in.
Mm-hmm. I want to congratulate you guys for putting that money aside.
Yeah, that's
It's
wonderful.
not easy.
Exactly.
You work very closely with the town, on some of those. We've had some, favorable settlements that you'll probably come to understand. But those reserves, those few large tax, owners are, coming forward. The IBM property was going to be used as a school. But that was a COVID fallout, situation. So that's not really, an opportunity anymore. And I think that presents us, the challenges of working through, some of the tax assessments that that we'll have to deal with.
And I think your point's well taken there too, that we have, the entire time I've been here, and Chris too, our relationship with the town has been wonderful on large matters such as this and the smaller ones. So certainly there's a spot that we're trying to get this matter addressed so that it doesn't continue another year, because every year it continues, that 22 million goes to 24.5 million, and so it just keeps snowballing. And so there is a clear support from the town. Let's see if we can get this thing settled, so we can just start figuring out what we're dealing with and move it through. So, so that's a key part.
What holds that up?
Well, typically what happens is like in any situation, a claim is made and there's usually a negotiation and a court settlement. It's a very legally prescribed process, so that could take a couple of years. So the claim comes in, and that's really your liability. Usually the claims come in far less, the settlement comes in far less than the claim. So with the smaller ones, what was your percentage? Maybe 20%?
Yeah, I'd say somewhere between 10 and 20% prior to.
Well, in that case, you almost have it covered.
Yeah,
Right.
but the larger ones, you have to specifically identify and reserve based on the merits of what you're dealing with. And that's really, the complication the challenge we have here. But you reserved a good portion of it.
Yes.
And hopefully, through negotiation, we'll
And I
get
think
through
that,
this.
and I think, Tony, that's the part where right now where we're seeing, and Chris and I spoke to the board last night or the other Tuesday at the board meeting, where we're at a spot now where there's enough other things that need to be taken care of in the school district, where we need to start trying to figure out how to fund those. For example, on the ballot this spring, we're asking for the ability to establish a capital reserve account. Again, it starts at zero, but it lets us save up to $10 million. And so what we're saying, like, look, we've got $7 million over here for the tax territory, but we need to start saving over here because we need to take care of our softball field and our baseball field. Desire to get tennis courts on the school, where those are over at Reese Park and things like that. And so there's enough large projects. Plus we have, some needs on our, not exciting, but paving and concrete work and all those kind of things that need to be
Necessary,
addressed.
yeah.
And so, but that's the opportunity. It's like, okay, we've got to get this thing started to save too. So the only other option there is if we don't have enough money saved, then at the board table, that the board would say, okay, well, then we need to bond the remaining if there's a remaining there.
So there might be a vote, there's going to be a vote.
Yes.
To establish a reserve,
Yep.
which is essentially creates a bucket.
Yep.
It doesn't mean you're going to put 10 million in there today,
Right.
but it allows you to get permission to start saving and building that.
Yes.
And
from
that's
the
coming
public.
up on the budget meeting?
That'll be a
on the
separate question on the ballot.
May 17th?
Yes.
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 Yep.
Separate
Yeah.
proposition on May
Separate
17th.
proposition.
Yep.
And yes, it does just establish another bucket, basically, for year-end transfers like we've just discussed,
Yes.
and that's how we funded the tax share reserve and other reserves. And this would just be another reserve for the capital fund that we can then put excess funds into there.
And our most recent example was, $5 million, and the
Yep.
work that we did out of that. You want to hit some of those highlights?
Yep, so with that last capital reserve that we did maybe 6 years ago, it was a $5 million limit, and we funded that completely. And out of that, we had the turf and fitness center, both turfs redone and the fitness center redone. We had a security vestibule done over here at the middle school. And then with the remaining, say, $3 million-ish, we put towards our safety and security bond project that the voters approved in 2019. And so what that did was the project for the safety and security was just over about $10.5 million, but we had $3 million already in this capital reserve fund. So then we only had to go out and bond about $7.5 million. So by having the funds in the capital reserve, it allows us to then borrow less and pay less interest over the 15 years, and it just helps us tremendously in planning for these projects.
I think that goes a long way to gaining you support. I mean, I come from a group of people who are very, very concerned about that, obviously, but the concern has always voted in support of you, and I think it will continue.
Yeah, and I would say that is a piece where we have, like you said, historically always had the support of the community, in particular our community of senior citizens and heritage hills and things. So, and that support where We're very proud about the schools that we have and the investment that everybody's made in these schools. So the ability for us to balance that, though, again, just allows us to keep these good programs moving forward. And so with this, that next savings account, one of the things, like, those tennis courts are in the town. As again, we share fields all the time. And for us to be able to get tennis courts on proper here helps us in a lot of different ways. The athletics, absolutely. But now all of our children in the high school can have tennis as a lifelong sport. They can learn how to play at the high school. Right now, we don't have that opportunity. That is one of those lifelong sports that you can learn and play that. Right now, if you don't happen to play for our team, then you're not going to get exposure to it. Bring that on to school, then we have physical education is going there in the fall and in the spring, and our children learning how to do that, as well as even this campus and get a feeder program going. So all the way back to where we started before about engaging kids, you're going to engage a lot more students when those facilities are, on the grounds and stuff. So, yeah.
Great. Are there any other key pieces of the 22-23, can't believe I'm saying that, budget that the voters should be aware of, or anything else you want to highlight in advance of the vote?
I would say certainly one of the things that we hit on the world language tonight is a very large one, moving to SAS campus, moving forward with all of the international baccalaureate work there, adding some more mental health support, in particular at the high school level. Those are some of the really key pieces that we've got going. And then that establishment of the capital reserve account is a critical piece to allow us to start saving, so we can avoid, the interest in the bonds on everything, and so we can hopefully just pay some of that out, being good savers and taking care of that. And then I would say that the other piece inside of there is that allows us to maintain what we have. So there's no cuts to programs. Our arts programs are continuing strong, and our extracurricular activities are continuing strong, and our students' academic access to courses and things continues and things. So all of the richness that has slowly and surely been supported and built over the years and years is not being kind of stripped away. And so that's I don't want to underestimate that and say that the value of that is, because you didn't get today by one budget vote. This community supported this budget for decades,
right,
and you got here because of every, kind of thing. You're being smart with it. A little, hey, we got to play it tight. We got to reduce some things here. We got to save some here and stuff. But there's nothing that's being stripped away from the fabric of the school district. So we're very, very much looking forward to next year. Reservation that I have, I'm sure Chris would share, is we're all familiar with the increasing cost of utilities. We just transferred about $250,000 to kind of pay for our February and March, utility bills for oil. And so we try to do the best we can forecasting that. So, but that is an unknown that we're not exactly sure from the expenditure side what that's going to look like. So, and that, I know we didn't talk about it too much tonight, but the other thing, and maybe Chris, you can have this, it is in the budget, is our energy performance contract, because that is, if that didn't come, that would have gone even up a lot higher.
Right. It was perfect timing for us to embark on the energy performance contract, which is basically a cost-neutral way to have some major upgrades to our mechanical systems, such as our boilers and hot water heaters, and that is funded through energy savings that we generate from, we're going to be putting LED lighting throughout the entire district, and that just generates energy savings there, which then helps pay for the boilers. And if we weren't doing these projects, then the cost of those utilities would be even higher than they would be with the just overall cost going up. And this whole project, again, the voters, we put this out onto the ballot last year, and the community supported it and approved it. And by doing that, we were able to generate an extra 10% in state aid that we'd receive on the project, which then just allows us to hit even more things with the project. So it's fantastic timing for this project to get underway. It's still currently up at S.C.S.D. for final review, and once that happens, we'll start immediately. And yeah, we should start seeing some improvements very quickly.
You should love the LED program.
Yes.
Because we're out ahead of you a bit there. And we've been at it now for 3 or 4 years, and it is amazing. It has brought our energy bills down dramatically.
Yeah, and that's the lighting is definitely one of the biggest drivers in savings and savings very quickly, which then helps us.
One of the big savings on the LED is the replacement. You don't, if you're spending money right now replacing lights and light fixtures, you don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where the real money is.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the, operation and maintenance
Yes.
savings that we're going to see, even with the new boilers that we won't need to be fixing as much as we have been recently when these things are replaced, so.
So a few years back, you put a solar array here on one of the roofs, and that sort of stabilizes your energy as well, or maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the solar array that we did here, not a large array, but something that definitely has helped these past few years. And solar is even something that we did look at, and we did have the energy service companies that submitted proposals for the energy performance contract. They all looked at having potential solar. But at that time, when we initially started this within the last year and a half or so, all of them kind of came back and said with the price that we're paying for utilities, it just wasn't worth it to include in the energy performance contract. Now,
Phase one, maybe.
phase
Come
one.
back Phase two, yeah.
Now with the price of utilities maybe
Yes.
going up.
Yeah, but we're going on that same review.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we're finding it's changed quite a bit.
Right, so things change very quickly.
Yep.
So it could be a phase two project for the energy performance contract that we might look to. Then maybe solar is a better option at that time.
Could we talk a little bit about the mentor program?
Absolutely.
We have a couple of people that are involved.
Yes.
But it hasn't seemed to grow.
Yes, and so the piece with that, Bill, is that we were right around 70 or so children that, walking into that March of 2020 before we closed down. We're a little bit less than 20 right now, and so we tried to do the Zoom thing, we tried to do the election, it just didn't work. We're very excited, actually. We're looking at kind of re-recruiting here in the spring and over the summer, starting back in the fall. Even we had a dedicated space for the mentoring program. We were able to get that back in the fall here in the middle school program. We used it as a COVID kind of isolation spot and things. So, talking with our director there, Phyllis, the other day, very much she had shared with me that now she's starting to get a few applications. So we're getting ready to kind of hit the recruiting trail here in June and through the summer, and then come back on the fall. And so, when you're looking at a school, even at the middle school, we were getting close, almost 1 out of 10 children in the school had a mentor. Mm-hmm. And so it was like we desire to get back in there, and really ultimately what we'd like to get is any child who would like a mentor has a mentor. So that's a part that we know we absolutely need to desire to get back to that spot. And so they're going to host their end of the season or end of the year kind of celebration here in a few weeks, but we want to get back to those healthier numbers where we were. The mentor program has been extremely beneficial for us. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit, I ask this question every year, give us an enrollment snapshot, where we are in the district, where the curve is,
Yep.
where it's moving to, and what your 5-year projection might be for enrollment?
So we have kind of seen the enrollment it starts at Primrose and works its way up K through 12. So the Primrose campus for probably the last 4 years has been kind of at its floor, so they've gone there. So they're around 525. It'll float up and down what it looks like based upon live birth rate and things. So about approximately 5.25, 575 maybe, so somewhere's in there. This SAS campus is now relatively at that same number of students there again. So again, 5.25, 550 is relatively where we see the floor. Now here at the middle school next year, they'll be just below 600 next year. So they're almost at where we would see their floor being there. And then next year it'll start hitting the high school. So that 4 or 5 year piece you'll see now hitting the high school, where the high school now will have below 1,000 students for the first time in quite a while. There are about 1050, 1040 this year, so there'll be about 980 next year. So you'll start seeing those numbers come down. So in about 4 years down the road, look at about 840 or so kids. And so then the district is going to be at its floor. And what we'll be seeing at that part is that has actually been an opportunity for us to help manage the budget and stay always within that 2% cap there, because we've had, through attrition, we've been able to say, let's not fill that position, let's not bring that position back online. And so you'll see that some other districts around us will kind of be at a higher number than that, but we've been able to stay at that cap, and that has helped us out in that regard, as well as supporting other things like next year, the world language position. That's that's an opportunity. So, well, we had a position drop of another area, so we didn't need to fill it back in that area, but we reallocated that FTE over to bring in world language at the SS campus. So that is an added value, budget to budget. It doesn't necessarily bring on another person. It just reallocates that full-time equivalent teacher to another spot. And so we'll be seeing that at the high school coming forth, and we'll approach it the same way. So, for example, in the world language department, we had a retirement of 2 of those teachers, and so instead of replacing both, we replaced 1. And then we still are a little short, like 2 classes. So we worked with our teacher team, great, and they said, well, we'll teach an additional period for that year. So they did it for a year, a little bit of overage, and now they're fine next year, but it allows us to save money, allowed us to also not bring on a whole other person for a year and then say goodbye. So that's the piece that we'll continue to do in that way. But world language is the one that I think of most recently just helped us do that.
So you mentioned tax cap. I think, the public's going to be very interested in, the budget increase, the levy increase, and what the caps are and how you're situated this year. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit about that.
Sure, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but again, we're at the cap piece there, which is allowable though up to about 3.53 this year.
3.92% would be the maximum allowable tax levy increase that we could have went with, then just needing a simple majority to have approved. We kept it at 2%, and that's all just with the community in mind.
Recommended number, approximately another $1.5 million could have been in
Correct.
conflict.
Yep.
So this is a piece that I know there's a lot of different dialogue, and I had some conversation not too long ago with some colleagues and things. So there's a perspective there that's like leaving money on the table, because you can never go back and get that. So that money I left on the table like 3 years ago, I want to go back and ask for it and get it again. Can't. And so this will be like our 3rd time, I think, since the whole cap piece started, that what the budget needed and required was what's there. What could have been asked was basically twice as much as what we're asking for. And say, no, we didn't. We did get some more dollars from the state, so great. Let's help offset those costs. And but that was a piece I want to make sure that there is a sense you leave it on the table, but there's also a sense of, look, in particular, our community have always and have a long time historically supporting the budget, and I think that, and I hope folks have that understanding. It's through faith in the school district, in this team, and our board, that we have faith that the ask is the ask. You ask, and so we're not going to ask because we could ask for twice as much money. We're going to ask because this is what we need to run the budget. So the $1.5 million could have asked for, we're not.
What makes the cap grow?
Yeah.
So there's
Most of the people still think it's 2% cap.
right. So there's a lot of exclusions that kind of go into the tax cap calculation. One of the biggest things is debt service payments. That's an exclusion from the cap. And then with that, you have to offset that with any state aid that you're receiving for it. So that's the biggest driver that can increase it well above 2%.
Doesn't that almost encourage you to indebt yourself?
Does it encourage us?
Well, isn't there an incentive there for the people that have borrowed more than we'd borrow?
But I would say that it'd be a tough ask of the community if we continued to just borrow money and then we're looking at a 6% increase in the tax levy cap number.
Right.
That's not something that we'd be looking to do. But yeah, so those are the biggest reasons that you'll see a tax cap number go above that 2%. But the 2% number that also is included is the CPI number that is included in the calculation.
Yeah, there is normal growth from
Right,
inflation.
and that's capped at 2%.
That's been rather bad
Yeah.
this year.
So that number was, I believe, at the time was 4.7%. But in the calculation, we are capped at that 2%. That's the most that we could use in that calculation.
So you have a budget increase, then you have some revenue, and then you develop, broadly speaking, a tax levy. All right, so the budget increase is,
Budget increase was about 3.59%.
okay, and then after revenues, that comes to a tax levy of
Tax levy was 2%.
2%.
Yep.
Okay. And then that gets apportioned throughout the community by dividing it up by assessments. And you come up with a rate. So how much is that rate going up?
So the estimated tax rate, the tax rate again is not set until August, and the town sets that, and again, based on the finalized assessments, that is going up, estimated to go up about 1.55%.
Okay, so that just comes down to like an estimated 1.75% increase in your taxes.
Well, considering the rise in inflation and everything, that's amazing.
And I think that's a part where, I know we didn't talk about it a great deal tonight, our ability to use our reserves accounts to help us handle these swings. And so I'll just call it a savings account that allows us to say, we're going to, on paper, allocate, we have up to $2 million in some years, so we're going to allocate $2 million to help it balance so we don't cut programs or lose things like this, or down to almost zero. This year, we're a little bit over $500,000, and so, but what that allows, say on paper, we're going to say that will balance the budget. We have never used those dollars that have been put on paper there. It just allows us to see, okay, what happens next year? These expenditures go down, revenues come up, but we're not decimating program or losing a couple of positions here or there. It just allows us to make that work. Again, at the end of the year, if we're 98, 99%, expenditures to budget, we're always in the black. And so it's like, okay, we've got it. So that's been an ability for us. So, okay, instead of passing it on, let's go on historical dollars we've generated. Let's allocate, $500,000, a little bit more to balancing on paper. So that was a piece that, again, allows us to not increase that tax rate, even though you could say, let's use our money smart. Let's balance it on paper. We don't need to be pushing this out to the taxpayers. And so we just kind of left it there.
So what I'm hearing is that you systematically, pretty much, you're coming in on the budget every year. And with those savings, you're using them to fortify reserves and working capital.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, that's a couple of big leaps to say that simply, but all those programs and savings and stabilization that you're doing with, energy contracts and things of the like, produces a favorable result of budget.
Yeah, but this year with the environment that we have in the energy world, as they were saying, they're having trouble doing that, and I certainly think you should. So you need the reserve to cushion you for this.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to just say thanks for everybody for coming tonight again. And so I appreciate the ability to help myself talk and Chris talk a little bit about what are some of the pieces coming forward to keep this school district moving forward. Challenging times, again, the UPK conversation there, really good stuff. I mean, we're looking at almost a quarter of our future kindergarten kids will be with us in UPK. So just gives us an all much better chance to start earlier in those things and then continue to work the International Baccalaureate program, bring on some support for our mental wellness, training for our teachers and professional staff. And so additional opportunities for our children. We're also bringing on next winter, we're bringing on bowling. So again, that's a whole other group of children that we can get in contact. So I think it may. I
was on the high school bowling team, mentioned to you before, so I love it.
Yes, and so it's another group of kids that we keep actively involved in our schools, and especially in the wintertime when, kind of it's dark and can't go out as much and things like that. So it gives us a chance to hook those kids and engage them and be part of the school. So again, it's an opportunity for us to, the more time they are with us and the better engaged they are, the better it turns out in the end. So thanks again, everybody.
All right, great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And that concludes the 2022-23 School Budget Roundtable. We want to thank you for watching, and a reminder that the school budget vote is on Tuesday, May 17th from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the Somers Middle School Gymnasium. Once again, thank you for watching.